look at each other. Let's just look at each other for 30 minutes. It'll be great. And yeah, so things don't always go the way we expect them to go. And sometimes we have to improvise, and sometimes we have to just go with what we got going. Our usual AV guy isn't here today, and I have someone filling in, and he's doing a great job and troubleshooting a lot of different things at the same time, so we're working on him. I just posted in our friend group on Facebook that people can watch on YouTube where the stream is live. So if anyone's texting you that they can't see it, go to YouTube. Okay, so hi. Hi. Thank you for everybody who was in Forum. That was fun. And I'm glad you're here. I missed seeing all of you these past 2 weeks. For anyone who's new, welcome. I'm Amy. I'm the interim ministry team director. I've officially spent a quarter of a year with you. Time flies. It's like, oh my, it's been a whole quarter. And since clearly I struggle with keeping with the themes, this is not really about the future of the earth, which is why I took that out of the script. I want to talk about people, as usual. That's what I like to talk about. Again, thank you for everyone who came to the forum today. As we learned, we have a lot of differences and a lot of similarities. When you have profound differences with someone, it's easy to assume what they mean when they do or say certain things. You might erroneously believe that it is the same thing that it would mean if you said or did the thing. Learning about each other's preferences can help bypass all kinds of potential issues. In the absence of knowledge, it's easy to take the actions and words of other people personally and assume they're trying to insult you or harm you. The only way to avoid this is to be curiously and proactively communicate, especially if you know other people's personality types. So I'm going to use Matthew Hyo. Where's Matthew? I see Allison. There's Matthew. As an example. So Matthew, I'm very fond of Matthew, and we had a meeting early in January to talk about the website, and afterwards we were talking about personality types, and he told me he's an INTJ, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, interesting. And then at some point I remember I emailed him and I said, I was like, where were you guys for this? I was so excited about the platform when my friend Alonzo was speaking and I was singing, and he responded, we weren't interested in the topic. And that was it. And if I didn't know that he was an INTJ, that might have hurt my feelings. I would have been like, but why? And it might have taken it personally. But instead I was like, oh, he's just giving me information. That's cool, you can not be interested. And it completely dissolved any feelings that I might have had about it. He gave me consent to say this, by the way. But that's the sort of thing that just in one moment, I have two options. I can take something personally and have my feelings hurt, or I can think about who this person is and what they probably meant by it, knowing who they are. So I didn't have to be activated. It was fine. And working with a diverse staff and board and congregation of strong-willed, intelligent people means I must over-communicate to make sure that I'm being clear and that everyone is on the same page. And I must not take things personally. If I truly want peace at work, I have to understand what makes everyone around me tick so I don't inadvertently push a pain point for them or communicate in a way that they don't understand or ask of them something that will be energetically unreasonable for them. And I have to interpret their reactions and responses using a different rubric for each person and still ask clarifying questions. Because, as my husband Rodney likes to remind me anytime I'm aggravated with someone's behavior, people different, baby. And he's never aggravated by anyone, really. He's just like, meh, people different, it's fine, they're doing what they do. So with the awareness that people are different, I'm committed to my ultimate goals at all times. Smooth, clear, and healthy communication, and safe, nonviolent conflict resolution. And this isn't surprising given that I'm an INFJ on Myers-Briggs, but it's challenging. Understanding personality types can help, but it also takes a lot of work. I sent some information about my personality type this week to my staff and board the other day so that they would understand where I'm coming from. This will hopefully lend itself to harmony and peace on our team, but I also think it's useful for all of you to know how I see my work, since in a way, you're all my colleagues. And this is spot on for me, and I know that there are at least a handful of other INFJs in the room, so this might resonate for you too. As managers, INFJs dislike wielding their power. They prefer to think of everyone as equals, no matter what a person's business card might say. Rather than micromanage they use subordinates, which I don't like, employees, INFJs often prefer to empower them to think and act independently. They work hard to encourage others and promote an atmosphere of mutual respect. Compassionate and fair, INFJ managers often take pride in identifying their employees' unique strengths. That's not to say that INFJs have low standards, far from it. Their sense of equality means that they expect their employees to live up to the standards that they set for themselves. Bosses with this personality type want their employees to be rigorous, motivated, reliable, and unfailingly honest. And they will notice if anyone misses the mark. INFJ managers can be particularly stern if they catch someone behaving in a way that they consider unethical. These personalities have little tolerance for lapses in reliability or morality. When their employees' good intentions match their own, however, INFJs work tirelessly to ensure that their entire team, you, feels valued, fulfilled, and successful. This is so accurate. And if someone didn't know these things about me and wasn't doing what I asked of them, they could certainly perceive me as being critical or having unreasonable standards. They could definitely take things personally. The truth is, I hold myself to the same standards as I hold everyone else. I don't think anyone is above or below me, better or worse than me, less or more deserving than me. I just happen to be in a leadership role here. And I want to feel respected and free. And I want everyone on my team and in my orbit to feel respected and free and get the work done. But I want everything to be fair for everyone. I want the work to be fairly and equitably distributed, and I want everyone to be compensated fairly. And I wish everyone just knew all of these things about me automatically, but I'm different than most people. So I have to inform and clarify and explain so that I'm not misunderstood or mischaracterized, so that people don't take everything I say or do personally, especially if I'm fired up or I'm being hyperbolic, and so that I don't take it personally when things don't go how I want them to. I've learned that we have to communicate so consistently, so rigorously, in order to make working together feel how everybody wants it to feel, that alone could become a full-time job, even though I only have part-time staff. A primary reason so many people are unhappy at work, not work here, but work in general, is that frankly, most people in leadership don't have the time, patience, or skill to set the tone just right for everyone in order to maximize their potential. And so often folks just shortcut and they go about their daily business and they don't do the work to have the conversations that need to be had. People experience their behavior and take it personally. Bad blood grows between colleagues. People hate their boss. They avoid having open dialogue, especially hard conversations, and instead talk about one another to other people. Everything feels personal. Even though at work, it should be just about the work. But it never is. It can't be. Everyone brings their whole self to everything, if we like it or not. I read The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz years ago. Has anyone read The Four Agreements? I'm not super into self-help books, but it was recommended by someone I respected, so I read it. And I remember finding it useful, but really struggling with the don't take anything personally one. Here are 2 quotes from the book. "Nothing others do is because of you. What others say and do is a projection of their own reality, their own dream. When you're immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering." That can be problematically extrapolated in a way I'm not willing to do, because there's a suggestion there that sounds kind of victim blaming. But I do generally agree with the statement when it comes to interpersonal relationships that, here's the other quote, "There's a huge amount of freedom that comes to you when you take nothing personally." I've historically struggled with this. I don't know about you. How many of you take things personally? It's okay, good, great. I'm so glad you're here. Maybe that's why you're here. I understand this concept, right? But in practice, it is especially hard for someone like me, and perhaps like many of you, who thrives on harmony and peace and meaningful relationships and intensely dislikes conflict that causes disconnection. Those of us who are intuitive feelers and MBTI, which we talked about in Forum, are particularly distressed by disruption to their relationships. But folks who are not intuitive feelers may not take things personally, ever, sort of naturally, but not necessarily because they've mastered some high-level emotional artistry, although that could be it. Could also be because of a natural lack of empathy, or because they themselves are not terribly emotional, or maybe they don't have insight into or interest in the emotional state of others. Neither's better or worse, but it's not without impact. This difference becomes relevant in relationships, whether romantic, workplace, friend, or family, because two people can have basically opposite reactions to a situation or dynamic and fail to understand where the other person is coming from. Someone who's very sensitive may experience someone who's more logical as cold, unfeeling, insensitive, even mean. And someone who's very logical may interpret someone who's more sensitive as overly emotional, dramatic, hysterical, or wishy-washy. When I, as an INFJ, experience disconnect, it can feel really personal. For all the work I do in this area, and as adept as I am at navigating it, I have to admit, I'm still sometimes uncomfortable with interpersonal discord of any kind. I can handle it at work, but in my personal life, sometimes I just get crushed. A dear friend and I had conflict earlier this year, which we'd never had before. And she didn't want to talk to me for what felt like a very long time. I definitely personalized that. It felt like a rejection of me and a rejection of our long friendship. I have a particularly hard time just sitting with it. You know, the self-help gurus will be like, just lean into it. Just sit with it. Like, I don't want to. I don't like it. I want to fix it. I just can't go about my business. I hate the feeling of being misunderstood or mischaracterized. And if I'm really being honest, I can sometimes even take that personally with people I don't even really like that much, which is ridiculous, because why would I care? Or on social media, if someone reacts to something I say and attributes negative meaning that I didn't intend, sometimes I can take that really personally, even from a stranger. Even though I can be spicy on social media, and I'm accustomed by now to new followers reacting to me, mostly I can handle it, but sometimes I still take it personally when it's clear they don't get me, because that's a pain point for me. Yes, friends, I'll say it again. Despite all this wisdom that I've collected for so many years from so many people, I do still often take it personally when I'm misunderstood, mistreated, or ignored. As such, my default has historically been to assume it's something I've done wrong and to over-respond, to try to identify it and fix it. But intellectually, I understand that most of the time it isn't even about me. In the case of my friend, she was having her own experiences and going through her own stuff, and she had limited capacity to process whatever happened between us, so she just set it aside until she was ready. She set it aside so she could attend to it lovingly later, but I received it as, this isn't important to me. And I got my feelings hurt, when really what she was going through that made her unavailable to repair with me in the time frame I preferred was her own stuff. In other relationships, especially more casual ones, I can often remain in a neutral or curious state. It is very helpful for me, regardless of how you feel about personality assessments like MBTI or other ways, pseudoscience ways of understanding folks like Enneagram or human design. It's helpful to have a blueprint that is confirmed by the other person. That's how I use these sorts of things. If I know certain things about someone that live in my internal file of them, then I'm able to contextualize them and not be offended when they behave in ways that I don't like or don't understand. Sometimes, though, people just do things that seem bizarre or irrational to me. So one of my other practices is that when people are being weird or annoying or doing stuff that doesn't make sense to me on the surface, I always have to remind myself that not only are people different, baby, but literally everyone is also out here playing out their childhood trauma in their adulthood. And whether those traumas be small t or big T traumas, we've all got them. And our inner children are acting up and acting out whether we're conscious of it or not. Whatever coping skills we developed in our early childhood to soothe ourselves or to handle stress or to earn love are likely still in our arsenal of coping skills today unless we've done a lot of intentional work to excavate and reframe them. I don't know if that helps you, but it helps me to forgive folks in real time, to know that most of the time they aren't trying to be weird or annoying. Most of the time what they're trying to do is get their needs met and feel safe. Most of the time, it's not about me. And if I waste time taking things personally, I will miss the truth. So if you are hurt by someone, or you don't understand why a person is behaving how they are, or what made them say the thing that they said, how they said it, just ask them with words. Be curious, not accusatory. Inquire sincerely about the thing that is troubling you. Say, that hurt my feelings. Can you tell me what made you say that? Or, this behavior is unlike you and it's kind of freaking me out. Can you tell me what's bothering you? Or, I sense that things are off between us. Can you tell me what I've done to upset you? Or, I don't really understand what you meant by that. Can you say it a different way so I can make sure to get it right? Do not, if possible, just let hurt feelings and misunderstandings go unattended. That is how relationships fall apart, when tiny unhealed wounds are allowed to fester. I would also invite you to remember that most people do not intend to be hurtful even when they are. Most people are just out here doing their best to protect themselves from being hurt. Applying intention and value to the behavior and words of others without inquiry is unwise, as most people are honestly not putting very much thought into how they're affecting others. When it is brought to their attention how they're impacting others, however, they have a choice to address the issues or not. You're likely to receive much more accurate information via people's response to your hurt rather than from the initial thing that caused the hurt. This is usually a function of misunderstanding, carelessness, and often just having no idea how they're being received. It's when you say, "Can you tell me more about this?" that they have the opportunity to recognize their impact, adjust their behavior or words, and have a more positive impact moving forward. Or not. Sometimes people will be unable to hear it. They'll be unable to hear how they were harmful, and they will become defensive. They might lash out. They might double down on the hurtful thing or behavior and insist that is exactly what they meant to do or say. They might gaslight you and make you feel like you don't have a right to your feelings. They might tell you all the things you did to make them do or say harmful things. This response is not about you, so I would invite you to simply receive the information and move on. Don't take it personally. Understand that this person you care about may not be in a place where they can have a constructive conversation about their behavior. Perhaps they're not used to being approached with kindness and curiosity, and they believe they have to protect themselves from what feels like criticism. Perhaps they are simply in the habit of defensiveness and they don't know a better way to resolve conflict. The best thing you can do then is to model the behavior you want to see in others. Treat the people you love with unconditional positive regard, such that when they, usually unintentionally, cause you harm, you don't have to take it personally or react harshly. Practice using words to ask clarifying questions and approach conflict from a place of, how can we resolve this? Versus, how can I hurt you back? Or worse, just giving up on the relationship and not giving people a chance to learn how to do it better. This is a tricky thing to consider when it comes to extreme scenarios outside of our personal and professional one-on-one relationship spheres. I don't want to be a Pollyanna who suggests you should be able to just shrug off hateful words and targeted bigotry. How do we not take it personally if someone hates us or judges us for our skin color, sexual orientation, gender identity, or some other fundamental and inalienable aspect of who we are, or targets or hates our child or children? I don't have a universal answer to this, and it's not really within the scope of this talk today to expand on all the ways in which other humans are harmful to each other and how best to respond, because I can't promise that won't hurt. But I do think these practices of not taking things personally are useful even in those cases. The misunderstandings people hold about an aspect of your identity are not your problem to solve, unless you make it so through advocacy and education, or you have the emotional capacity to engage in conversations with people who fundamentally oppose your values or are hateful towards you and your loved ones. I personally do not have this emotional capacity. But it can help me to remember that bigotry is distinctly not personal, despite feeling so, because most often, someone who is operating within their own indoctrination received bad intel from folks who didn't know better. So to the extent that you're able to, you can impose a psychological barrier between their ill-informed opinions and your spirit, reminding yourself always that someone else's biases are not personal towards you. They were not formed in relationship or reaction to you as a human being. They are reflections of their own lack of knowledge, understanding, curiosity, and/or empathy. And I know this is an abstraction and not a concrete strategy, and there's a whole other platform talk here. But at least for me, this kind of reframing lends itself to me being able to step out of personalization. Another thing I try to do to avoid personalization is to ask a lot of questions. Another quote from the Four Agreements is, "Find the courage to ask questions and to express what you really want. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings, sadness, and drama." This one is a very important lesson and one that I think I tend to do pretty well most of the time. Sometimes it takes me a while to muster the courage to ask questions, particularly when I know I might not like the answer. But in the end, I'd rather get my feelings hurt with the truth than wander around making assumptions or speculating about motivations that ultimately hurt worse than even the most painful truth could. It's the assumptions we make about what other people are thinking or feeling that get us in trouble. Or rather, it's the combination of making assumptions and then taking it personally, whatever we decided is happening. Most conflict is born of misunderstanding. Most of the time, if you have a conflict with a person, if you sit down, look at their face, ask questions, and listen to the answers, you will resolve the conflict. Moreover, you will often even find that you were entirely mistaken in how you perceive the other person's actions. But how often do we instead just have a miscommunication or confusing interaction and then just run with our anger or irritation at the person who made us feel bad? Worse, we may decide something about them based on whatever annoyed or hurt us. We make up a story about what happened and even about who they are without investigating. What you end up with is being angry or hurt over something the other person rarely even realized was bothering you, much less was intended to personally upset you. If you don't say, "I didn't like it when you did this, it bothered me. What were you thinking or feeling when you did this? Help me understand," then you can't expect true resolution to whatever the conflict was to begin with. If you don't say something like this, you've agreed to let a relationship suffer because you took something personally and didn't have the courage to examine it. Now, I read this recently when I was thinking about this and reading what others have said about personalizing things, and to be honest, this quote kind of hurt my feelings. This writer said, it was a blog, and I should have taken their name. I did not, but I didn't write this. "Yes, taking things personally is all about ourselves and our ego. We think the world revolves around us, and everything people do is specifically targeted to us. Intellectually, that may sound ridiculous or extreme, but it's what we do all the time without realizing it." I was like, ugh. Me? Ego? No. But why is this a problem, okay? It gets in the way of your relationships. Imagine you recently started seeing someone, and you guys are texting all the time. You're very excited about this person. They're doing the good morning text and everything. If you've been married for 50 years, this might be a foreign concept, but imagine some other scenario like this where you're in regular contact, like maybe with a new friend or someone that you're excited to get to know. But imagine one morning you don't get the text you're used to, or they don't respond to the funny meme that you sent them that they usually do, or they have their red receipts on and leave you on red. You may start worrying and personalizing. You may ask yourself, are they mad at me? Did I do something wrong? Are we in a fight? You may write a whole story in your head about what happened and why they didn't respond. You may walk around for days convinced that something dramatic has occurred and that had everything to do with you and how this person feels about you. But you know what? There could be a million reasons why this person didn't text you back. Maybe they had a family emergency or a work deadline, or they broke their phone, or they dropped it in the toilet, or maybe they just didn't feel like talking that day. Maybe they're in the midst of a depressive episode, and they don't want to tell you that because it seems too personal to share so early. The reason for them not texting, whatever it is, probably has nothing to do with you. So when the person eventually does respond, assuming they do, you will probably have an answer to whatever the thing was. And usually the thing was nothing about you. But if it was, and you did do something to upset them, hopefully they will tell you and allow you to respond and repair. Even then, however, as hard as it is, your best bet when you're waiting for the information was to assume a neutral state, to stay in curiosity. I wonder why they aren't responding. I hope they're okay. It's safe in many cases to say that. I remember I was dating a lot in my 30s, and this guy that I'd gone out with once and had been in regular contact with just stopped responding. And so after, I didn't care that much because I wasn't sure about him. But I reached out after a week and I was like, should I extrapolate from your lack of response that like you're not interested? Like, just let me know. And he was like, no, I'd love to go out again. I'm like, what? Like, who doesn't respond for a week? So it turns out that this guy's communication style was like not really for me. But I'm glad I reached out to clarify his position rather than just make up a story and decide he didn't like me. Fast forward though, I'm married to a person who consistently does not respond to text messages. He makes an effort with me far greater than his effort in other relationships, but even then I will send him all kinds of things that don't get a response. I'm like, did you see my text earlier? He'll be like, babe, I was at work. You sent me 17 things. Like, well, it was important. But I learned a long time ago not to take this personally from him. I understand him individually, but more importantly, I understand his personality type. And ENFPs are very often engaged in whatever they're engaged in and not paying attention to other things. The same thing about him makes him late regularly. I'm sure many of the people in his life are consistently annoyed if they take it personally when he doesn't respond in a timely manner or shows up late. But to them, I'd say he isn't doing it on purpose. He isn't doing it to upset you or ignore you. He's just doing other things that he's fully engaged in, and he's not thinking about you right then. But he's fully engaged when he is present with the person, and that's why I would say, like, this thing about ENFPs, especially if you have them in your life, is just know that they are fully engaged when they're engaged. For the rest of the time, they're not thinking about you. And this is so often the case, right? So often people are just doing their own thing, and they're literally not imagining that they have any impact on anyone. I think one should know that not responding for a week might be interpreted as disinterest or even being ghosted. But then I have been very surprised to hear how my action and inaction has been interpreted. I've started informing everyone around me of what things mean and don't mean so I can hopefully get ahead of people's assumptions. Example, if I stop responding in the middle of a chat or a text or email, it always means I got distracted, I arrived at my destination, or my child interrupted me. Please don't take this personally. If I typically respond quickly to emails and one time I don't, please don't take it personally. I probably missed it, and you should follow up. If I forget your name or forget a conversation we had, please don't take it personally. I speak to literally hundreds of humans regularly. I can't possibly remember everything. It's not personal. If you ask me to follow up with you about something and I forget, it's not personal. Just ping me again. Please don't take it personally. I do all of this in all my relationships, and people still take things personally sometimes or make up their own stories about me, which stinks, but at least I'm trying to get ahead of that. So if we're thinking about how or why this happens, one thing to consider is that people-pleasing, which we talked about in February, and personalization can go hand in hand. If you're always trying to avoid doing something wrong, any perceived slight will feel very personal. You will always think that everything is about you and how you did the wrong thing, and everybody's mad at you. But the truth is, most things are not about you. Ruiz's opinion is, nothing other people do is because of you, it is because of themselves. All people live in their dream, in their minds. They're a completely different world. They are in a completely different world from the one that we live in. When we take something personally, we assume that they know what is in our world, and we try to impose our world on their world. So let's pause on that for a second. Your reality is simply that, your reality. Their reality is their reality. While it would be nice if we could go back in time and consult with objective truth about an interaction, unless it is recorded and then coded by a computer, that's not really a thing. Everything gets filtered through everyone's own version of the world. You can both tell the same story of an event and both be telling the truth and still end up with wildly divergent tales. It can be frustrating, but if you know how human beings are, you know it's inevitable. Even conversations take on tones in the retelling that the original speaker may insist were not present. I did not say it like that. Comes up all the time in marriage and couples coaching. And those who are very literal might be hung up on, well, what you said was, and those of us who are more intuitive communicators might be annoyed and be like, yeah, but what I meant was, and the next thing you know, you've derailed and turned it into conflict that everybody took personally. The fact that we all have our own version of reality to some of you may be a philosophical question you could debate about for hours. But for my purposes, I'm claiming it as a thing that consistently happens. And in this context is a meaningful distinction that if you understand in your bones can help you stay out of personalization. Everyone is having their own experience completely independent of you. When you feel like the bartender is ignoring you, or when someone cuts you off in traffic, or the bank teller seems rude, remember it's never personal. They don't even know you. So there's no reason to feel slighted or offended. You're just a random human being in their orbit. Have any of you heard of the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows? No? Okay. We'll check it out. It's interesting. But the author, John Koenig, coined the term sonder to describe this. Sonder, noun. The realization that each random passerby is living a life as vivid and complex as your own, populated with our own ambitions, friends, routines, worries, and inherited craziness. An epic story that continues invisibly around you. Another major lesson then, I skipped part of that because we're running the whole time. You didn't miss anything important, but it distracted me a little bit. So another major lesson though, is you can't take anything personally from your children, especially when they're young. Nothing is about you. They don't know anything, they're just babies. And they're learning to move through the world, and your job is to give them feedback about how it's going and how they're being received. They will practice all their worst stuff on you. They'll take their emotional state out on you. They will fail to appreciate everything you do, and they'll tell you you're doing a bad job. It's fine. You can't take it personally. My 6-year-old Zoe gets a stinky attitude with me pretty regularly. And as exhausting as it is, I know it's because she feels safe and comfortable with me. She doesn't do it at school. She doesn't do it to anyone else. It isn't personal. Or if I choose to make it personal, I should frame it positively. She chooses me specifically as a safe place to land on her worst days. That's a gift. In the handful of times I've been fired by clients, I don't take that personally. I'm proud of them for knowing what is right for themselves and identifying that I am not that. Even though it's usually the result of a misunderstanding or miscommunication, and so I may feel disappointed, I don't ever take it personally. It's not about me. It's about this person making their own decisions, and that is what I want for them. I don't take things my clients think or say or feel personally, because even when they are technically about me, they're reacting to me in a specific role. It's not me. It's not me, human being. It's me, coach, saying some shit they don't want to hear. You know, it's me as a therapist, like holding up a mirror to something that they don't like. It's not personal. This is a thing I'm very slowly grappling with, some hard lessons along the way. I can only control my own stuff. People are going to do and say whatever they want. You can't control that, but you can control how you respond. And I can't know what's happening with the other person unless they tell me. So if I know this and I accept it, then I can only be responsible for ensuring that all of my interactions are positive and contain good intentions and honesty and integrity. If I'm misunderstood or if someone else's junk gets in the way of making a connection with me, that's not my problem. It's not my fault. It's not my burden. Neither is it yours, should that ever take place in your life. I can only control what I contribute to the relationship or interaction. I won't always be great at this. But even at my best, my intentions and efforts can be as honorable as it gets, but if the other person is unable or unwilling, I can't make someone else be reasonable or forgiving or compassionate. If someone willfully misunderstands or won't listen or stubbornly insists on an inaccurate perception of a situation or event, inaccurate in my view, we can't change that. Similarly, if I make a sincere effort to connect or reconnect with a person, whether it's someone I care about or am getting to know and they aren't interested or they reject my offer of connection, I don't need to take that personally. I'm not for everybody. You're not for everybody. If someone doesn't want to mess with you, it's fine. Doing so, taking it personally only allows me to continue negative self-talk loops that are likely to keep me from trying to connect in the first place. So try not to take it personally if someone doesn't bother to get to know you, or someone doesn't want to date you, or be your friend, or says they don't have time for you, or even says something about you that you know isn't true. Yes, I know that is really hard. Just continue to be a good person and be open to the world and all the wonderful things it has to offer you. If you can connect authentically with even one or two other people who really know you and always give you the benefit of the doubt, you're doing better than a lot of other people are. But either way, let's work on operationalizing this agreement. Take nothing personally. And remember, people different, baby. Thank you.
Thank you again, Amy, for sharing your wisdom. All right.